Hello and welcome to the Ren Den. I'm Ren and today we are going to lay the foundation for an enormous embroidery sampler. So I've had this idea for a little while. I think I've mentioned it in a couple of videos before, but basically while I was completing this enormous rainbow sampler, which there is a video on the sort of process of that as well, that you feel free to check out. While I was finishing that, I thought, wouldn't it be cool to do something even bigger? Because the thing that was really cool about the process of doing it was learning all these new stitches, having a chance to try out lots of different things, but also creating something really cool looking at the same time. So the concept is wall scroll. So this broadly is the idea, just so you can see the kind of illustration of it. This is the stick. It's going to go in a loop of fabric at the top, and then there'll be a strip of fabric that I can scroll round this initial bit as we get further and as it gets longer. So I can kind of choose what to display along the strip. I haven't decided yet whether I'm going to do the name and then the stitch next to it, or the name and then the stitch underneath it. There are pros and cons to both of those, obviously. This one means that there will be less white space in between the stitches, so the whole thing will look kind of denser and more colourful and kind of more vibrant. But if I do this, it gives me more space for doing, like, if I want to kind of list different name variations. It doesn't matter if the name is longer, I can still fit it without worrying about cramping the stitch or not doing as much of the stitch. So at the moment I'm gearing towards this one, but I will see how I feel when I get there. I went through all of my stitch books and made a spreadsheet, love a spreadsheet, of all of the different kinds of stitches and sort of cross-reference, like, is this the same stitch that just has a different name? And I made a list of 267 different kinds of stitch. Now this isn't going to be everything, but it'll be certainly enough to be getting on with. I should say one of my main resources for this list has been the RSN Essential Embroidery Stitches book, which is a huge tome of so many different kinds of stitch for canvas work, for embroidery. Really great resource, really clearly laid out, definitely recommend. So what I've done is I've put them in a spreadsheet because I want to randomize the order in which I do them. However, I do slightly want to control the beginning of the sampler, and that's what we're going to do in today's video. I'm going to do the first 10 stitches, build the sampler, hopefully, and do the first 10 stitches, which I think are kind of like the most basic, sort of really good, like 10 wheelhouse stitches, basically. That's the idea. The way that I'm going to keep this interesting for myself is I have also made a spreadsheet list of every different colour of embroidery floss that I have and numbered them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to randomise the colours that I use to make the stitches. Obviously, I can just, regenerate the random number if I'm doing like the same thing in a row or it's getting too sort of samey. But I think that would be a really fun way of using up embroidery floss, using colours I wouldn't normally use, and just kind of doing like a chaotic rainbow aesthetic because I'm using quite plain fabric. Hang on, I have some things. So this is the stick that I'm going to hang it from. And I'm using this fabric, which has quite a sort of clear weave, because I think that will make it easier to do, especially some of the more structural stitches, really evenly. I'm also going to stitch the name of each stitch next to, or possibly above, each row of stitches, so that, because that's the one thing that, like, for this particularly, I can go back to it and go, oh, that stitch is really cool, I wonder what that is. And I have to go check the book. So in order to try and circumvent that slightly, I want to label all of them. So step one, I think, is going to be prep the fabric. I want to square it off so that I can get as even as possible with this, because what I'm essentially going to do is cut the strip from it and then if I ever get to the bottom of that strip, I will cut another strip and stitch it to the bottom of that strip. So I do want it to be, I want the whole piece of fabric to be squared off before I start, so that I've got a chance of making it feel even as I go. I'm also going to need to hem the sides and make the loop, the sort of fabric loop at the top. So let's do that first. Okay, so in order to square off the fabric, first I need to figure out, pick a corner, basically. This edge of the fabric, this is some like remnants packet scrap thing. Both of the sides of the fabric are the selvage. Is it selvage edge or selvage? Anyway, that. So they're not going to fray. The fact that they're not going to fray is actually a good argument for doing it this way around, and this be the top and the bottom, and then I don't have to worry about seaming that. Okay, I'm going to do it this way round, even if I only get 2 strips out of it and then some left over, because these strips are already really long. So I think that'll still keep me occupied for a good long time. And then the plan always is, if I do get to the end of this fabric, to just stitch a different fabric to the bottom and kind of enjoy the patchworkiness of it. But I honestly think that's going to take a while. My understanding is that I can trust the selvage brackets edges to be even, but not necessarily the cut edge. So what I need to do is pick a thread from here and follow it all the way along to even out the side. That's my understanding of how this works. I'm gonna try and see what happens. Is that working? It's not working. I should have ironed this first instead of planning to do it afterwards, I think. Honestly, that didn't go as badly as I thought it would. I've left a little fringe on the edge from where the kind of last threads were coming out, to try and protect that edge, because the next thing I need to do is iron this so that I can measure it and cut my first strip. And then I think I will have to do side seams, or hems rather, which means getting the sewing machine out. And then I think that'll be the point at which it's time to worry about the top loop. So, ironing, and then I will be back for whatever I just said I was going to do. Iron, measure, cut. See you in a minute. So I got distracted. It is now the next day. Good morning. I have pinned and pressed the edges of my fabric on both sides. And I'm just gonna, I thought about using the baby boy sewing machine, but this fabric is a little bit thicker than the fabric I was using on the baby boy. And I do have more confidence in this at producing something that is going to last a little bit longer. So we're using the old girl. I've just rethreaded it. I don't have matching thread. This is like a cream fabric, and I don't have cream thread, which now that I'm thinking about it seems like an error. So I've decided I'm gonna not even try and like a little bit color match, because I think it's not going to be nice. And I'm going to do it in black. I'm hoping that, because I'm literally just going to do a line. I've got to make sure it's quite straight so that it looks good. But also I'm hoping that that will make it quite, like, that the thread will sort of frame it in that way. So I'm going to do a little bit in the black thread, and then we'll see if that looks nice. I appear to have picked my distance, and annoyingly, oh no, it does it lines up with that. Okay, I figured out what I'm going to line up with. So hopefully, we can sew a straight line. I think that looks quite smart. I think they'll look quite nice. I hope it'll look quite nice. Okay, that's quite neat. It's a little bit snarly on this back corner, but the other corners are pretty good, I think. Oh, and that corner. So yeah, this side's a bit snarlier than that side, but that's fine. So I'm going to secure these ends, and then we're going to work out how to do the loop. Broadly speaking, it needs to be able to slip on and off this in case I change my mind about what I'm doing. Like that. Okay, and then we need to make sure that the other side is the same. And then in theory, we have a scroll. Okay, so how am I going to stay even on this? I've got little inch markers on the plate here, so in theory, if I just figure out where I want my line to be, it's slightly further than the furthest inch line, which is irritating. Do I have tape in here? I put a little tab of tape on here, and it's far enough away from the sewing that it shouldn't be a problem. Then I can draw with a pen that I definitely know where it is. So I want it to be about there, which means now that we have a guideline, we have a chance of doing a straight line. Okay. Hey. I'm never entirely sure that I've been successful until just 2 threads come out of the machine at the end. I think that looks quite smart. Where's me stick? Moment of truth. It fits. There we go. Right, I'm just going to neaten these edges and then we'll see how it scrolls and then work out, oh no, now I have to decide how I'm going to do the stitches. I haven't thought about it yet. I'll think about it while I'm neatening these edges. So other than the fact that I might need to iron it again, it's such a simple thing. It's literally a roll of fabric hemmed on a stick. It's bringing me so much joy. I'm already kind of like thinking about, are there other things that would give me a reason to make a cloth scroll? It's such a satisfying object to hold, I can't tell you. So success so far. The next thing to do is going to be the stitches. Now, as I said, I've got 10 stitches that I think are kind of like your basics, or that are like themselves the basis of a lot of other stitches, that sort of thing, that I want to do first. And then after that, it's going to be truly random. The colours of the first 10 will be truly random. I've got something like 170 flavors colours of embroidery floss. So yeah, hopefully we can use some of that up and make a fun thing. What I'm thinking is it should have a title. I'm going to call it the Infinite Embroidery Sampler. That's too long. I'm going to call it the Infinite Sampler because in theory it is infinite. You could just tack another bit of fabric to the bottom and keep going. I think I am going to do the name of the stitch and then underneath the stitch, so that I can have like a full bar across the fabric of that kind of stitch rather than it just being different at the front. Okay, here's what I've come up with. I think what makes sense is, first of all, I'm going to do the title in cursive because it will be big enough that I think it will be reasonably straightforward to do in backstitch. The text for the labels is going to be more kind of like school handwriting, I guess, because I think, again, at the smaller scale, I think that'll be easier to do and to read once it's done. I have decided to do the stitches all the way across. I think, especially like cross stitch has got a bunch of different names, and I think it would actually be cool to include as many as will fit. I've just been sort of working out spacing. I think this one looks better than these two because of bringing it in either side, so I'm definitely going to keep that. And yeah, I don't think I'm going to need more than a centimetre. So this is only a centimetre, this is only half a centimetre. I don't think I'm going to need more than a centimetre for any, certainly any of the 10 stitches, and then we'll see how things go. I'm being quite precise about it. We'll see if this bears across on the actual thing. Now that that's decided, I need to trace this lettering onto the fabric and decide what colour it should be. Do you know what? I think I might do it in black because it'll match the borders quite nicely, and that'll kind of pull that sort of whole thing together. Okay, so I've got this notebook, which is my, like, keep track of what colour codes I'm using for projects sort of thing, because I think it would be helpful to not just randomly roll the colours, but also keep a record of what I've used. So for the title, DNC 310, which is black, and I'm going to be using all 6 strands of it because I want the title to be nice and big. I think that will be the most effective way to cover ground. Exciting! First stitches. So once I've secured my thread, I'm just going to do a nice back stitch, try and keep it really even, and try and make something pretty. I'm so pleased with this. You know, sometimes I find it really hard to find joy in things. Making something from scratch with my hands is always a cure to a greater or lesser extent. I already love this. However the stitching goes, I think I'm just really happy with it. That's just my handwriting. It's beautiful. So I have ironed this, partly because obviously the hoop loops would have been less impressive, and partly because of the heat erasable pens that I was using for guidance. That was kind of magic. I did like one pass with the iron and I couldn't see it anymore. So that was very good fun. So the next thing to do is the first 10 stitches. The first one is running stitch, which the writing out of the words running stitch is going to take me longer than it will to do the running stitch. On the plan, le plan, I had in mind to do several rows of running stitch, but actually I think what I'm going to do is literally do one line of running stitch. Now that I know that the heat erasable pens work, I can draw all over this. So I'm going to sketch out the running stitch section, and then we will find out what colour it's going to be. running or basting stitch, the line running or basting stitch has got sticks and tails. So sticks, body, tail, gap, stitch, yes, gap. So that's how much space it should take up. Does it look like a handwriting page yet? I really am like trying to do school handwriting on this, just out of instinct. Give me a bunch of lines to write on and I'm like, right, how come I do like square letters? Running. That's quite neat. And then, yeah, it will be as simple as running, doing a running stitch along here somewhere. I was going to do it along the middle of this bit, but it strikes me that it's such a narrow stitch, I might literally do it on this top line. But first we gotta pick the colour. The colour that the random number generator has thrown up is 114, which is actually code 352, and I've described it as a yellowish pink. These could be yellowish pink. 754 352. That's the number. The system works. There you go. That's what's going to be our running stitch. I actually don't know where this thread came from. But I am going to show you my technique for getting threads out of embroidery floss really easily, even if you have bad embroidery scissors, because you can spend ages unraveling and untangling, and actually there's a really simple way to do it. So here's our thread, and what I'm going to do is use my nail to kind of feather out one end, and all I'm going to do is grab that thread there and just pull it straight out like that. And you'll see the rest of the thread is bunching behind it, but it is letting it through. And there we go. But Ren, you say you wanted 3 threads. Yes. So I'm going to do this 3 times. Each time pulling one thread on its own out of the thread, the bundle, whatever you call this main bit. Separating the threads like this means that they're not twisted around each other. Look at that, it's pretty. Which means that your stitches will actually look more even, especially if you're doing something like satin stitch. It'll look a lot more even if you've done that. So you can see this thread is still twisted around itself, and then these 3 threads, I'm not holding it taut, I'm just holding them together. I'm making a much smoother line already. And when I come to use this other half, I will separate out the threads and do it the same so we've got the same texture on both. So now we've got our thread. We need to hoop the bit and then do our first stitch on the Infinite Sampler. There we go. There's number 1. It once again obviously needs an iron. I'm not going to iron it again yet because I need these lines to help me work out the next bit. So the next one is backstitch, which thankfully I could only find 2 alternative names for backstitch and hemstitch. Definitely rethinking the idea to have as many names for a stitch as possible, because stitching the words took so so much longer than stitching the actual stitch, which I thought was probably going to be the case, but you know, actually playing that out has made me, I mean, you know, it's good to practice my lettering, but it is quite a lot of time not actually doing the stitch. So now it's time to carry on and to try and do the next 10 stitches. Video wise, I will slightly breeze through these and let you know how long it actually took me on the other side. So, wish me luck. So I've had a little bit of a hiccup with the idea that I can randomly generate the colours for this thing, which is I started doing feather stitch in a pale pink because that was what the spreadsheet told me to do. And I got about halfway through the word feather and then realised that you can't see it. Like, it's just going to look like an empty space once it's up on the wall. At best, it'll look like a textured empty space. And that just does not spark joy. So I'm being slightly more selective in my colour choices, in that anything that has the tag of light or pale on the spreadsheet, because I didn't just do the codes, I did the colour and like a sense of like if it's dark or bright or redder than than the initial colour tag would suggest, so that it's easier to find them in the box. Anything that's got pale or light attached to it, I am going to be more reluctant to use, I think. But I'm still going to have to check them one by one, because when I wrote the tags, I wasn't doing it with that in mind. I also think I'm not going to use my ombre threads. As much as I like them, I think the simplicity of the colours on this is working really well, and I think the ombres all also have like a whiter section where it's just going to disappear. So again, I just don't think it's worth doing that on this. So we will be slightly more selective moving forward, but we're on the 5th stitch, so we're getting there. It's so good. So this took me maybe a week and a half. Yeah, it took me 10 days. And that was pretty exclusively, if I wasn't working or eating or sleeping, I was either doing this or thinking about doing this. But it was so worth it. So the next thing to do is hang it here. I've got my stick. I do have string, but for the first attempt, what I'm going to try and use is this lovely chain of glass beads that I got at a craft fair. It's vintage. I think it's from the 80s, 70s or 80s, I forget. I think it will catch the light really nicely, and yeah, I think I have another lobster clasp that I could probably attach to the other end, so I could just have like a loop here and then a loop here, and then it would hang in the middle, and I think that's quite a nice length. So I'm going to try and set that up. I know that this is gold and this is silver, but we're going to use a minimal amount of this, so I think it will be fine. So we've got quite a nice jump ring there. So all I want to do is take this ring off of the chain, keep it attached to the lobster claw, and then attach that ring to this ring. Ideally, you would have 2 sets of pliers to do this, but I don't. So take that off the chain. I'm going to actually leave that clip to there for a second. I don't want to let go of that. Okay, pop this on here. These, and then just gonna pull this back. And like, if it was a piece of like wearable jewelry, I would be slightly more concerned about making sure that this is a really tight join. Oops. But because it's going to be hung on a wall, I'm not going to worry about it particularly. So that gives us a necklace with a lobster claw on each end. So that should be all we need. Et voila! As you can see, there's still quite a lot of space to fill on it, but given that 10 stitches took me 10 days, I think I might have a little break before I do the next batch. But I have really enjoyed the process. I thought I was being a little bit pedantic with my like measurement lines, but actually it's come up so crisp and neat, so I'm definitely gonna do that when I do the next bit. I think my favourite stitch was couching the threads. I thought that was it just has such a cool effect. You can use the same colour thread to couch down the sort of top thread, but I thought having the colour contrast would work really nicely, and it does. It looks kind of very grand and a little bit medieval, which is sort of my vibe in an aspirational way. So yeah, I think that randomly selecting the colours did me a lot of favours, because it really helped me to sort of get out of the headspace of like what colour looks nice next to this colour. It wasn't 100% foolproof. As I mentioned, I did discount anything that was like pale or anything that was ombre as I was going through, but otherwise I think it pulled up a really nice selection of colours, so I'm really pleased with that. And using those beads to hang it, I'm really in love with how that looks. Unfortunately, the hook itself is just a command strip hook, which has already served me because I actually put it too high when I first hung it. So I'm okay with that for now. At some point, I would like to put a nice hook in to sort of match the aspiration of the rest of the piece. But that's it. 10 basic stitches, the beginnings of an infinite sampler, in the sense that I can just stitch more fabric to the bottom and keep going. You know, it's really never going to be finished. And I think that's kind of the joy of it, really. So I hope you've enjoyed that process. Let me know if you think there's any stitches in particular I should be looking forward to. Herringbone is definitely one that I've got kind of my eye on for something down the line, but I also can just randomize the stitches, so that will be fun too. Feel free to like and subscribe as always, but otherwise take care and I will see you on the next project.